The Apple Park conference room looked exactly like I'd imagined from every tech documentary I'd ever watched. Minimalist white furniture, glass walls overlooking Sortino's landscape, and 12 executives in various combinations of black turtlenecks and designer denim sitting around a table that probably cost more than most people's cars. My father stood at the head of that table in a suit I'd never seen before, presenting on a 120-inch screen to people who controlled more wealth than some countries' GDP. I watched from 380 miles away in Seattle, sitting in my apartment, laptop open to a live stream I'd hacked into 20 minutes earlier. Dad had sent me the meeting invitation 2 days ago, not to attend, but with a casual note, "Big presentation at Apple. Wish me luck." No details, no context, just corporate enthusiasm from a man who'd barely spoken to me in 3 years. Now I understood why. "What we're offering today," Dad said, his voice carrying that particular confidence of someone who thinks they've already won, "is a revolutionary back-end optimization algorithm. My daughter, brilliant girl, PhD from Stanford, developed the foundational code, but she's always been more academic than commercial. She doesn't understand business scaling. That's where I come in." He clicked to the next slide. It showed system architecture diagrams, my system architecture diagrams, with a new label, Morrison Optimization Protocol version 2.0, Enterprise Ready. The algorithm reduces server response times by 47% while cutting energy consumption by 32%, Dad continued. "We've tested it across multiple platforms. It's stable, scalable, and ready for immediate deployment. Apple's server infrastructure could see cost savings of approximately $800 million annually." A woman in her 50s with sharp features and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun leaned forward. I recognized her from Tech News, Sarah Tmain, Apple's Senior Vice President of Internet Services. "And the intellectual property is clean? No university claims, no co-developers, no licensing complications." "Completely clean," Dad said. "My daughter developed it independently, and I've acquired all commercial rights. We're offering exclusive licensing to Apple, $2.4 billion for perpetual use, full documentation transfer, and 5 years of implementation support." My hands were shaking. I set down my coffee before I spilled it. The algorithm Dad was selling, the one he called Basic Starter Code, was something I'd spent 4 years developing. It wasn't foundational work. It wasn't academic theory. It was a complete functioning system I had built while completing my doctorate, using research grants from the National Science Foundation and private funding from 3 tech companies who had sponsored my work in exchange for non-exclusive licensing rights. Non-exclusive meaning I could license it to multiple parties, but I couldn't sell exclusive rights without violating existing agreements. Dad apparently hadn't researched that part. On screen, another Apple executive unmuted, a man in his 40s wearing glasses and an expression of barely contained skepticism. "Can we see a live demonstration? We'd want to verify the performance metrics before discussing acquisition." "Absolutely," Dad said. He shared his screen, showing what looked like a dashboard interface. "I'll run a processing simulation right now. Watch the response times." He clicked execute. The screen showed a loading animation for 3 seconds, then displayed an error message, authentication required. Master developer key not found. Dad's confident smile flickered. "Let me refresh." He tried again. Same error. "Technical glitch," he said, voice still controlled. "The system is fully operational. Let me pull up yesterday's test results." "No," Sarah Tmain interrupted. "We need to see it function live. That's non-negotiable for a $2.4 billion acquisition." I opened a separate window on my laptop, the actual control panel for my optimization algorithm, hosted on secure servers under my personal credentials. The system Dad was trying to demonstrate was pulling from my infrastructure, but he didn't have authorization to execute anything. He'd only had access to documentation and test results I'd shared with him last year when he'd asked what I was working on these days. I pulled up the system logs. They showed multiple access attempts from Dad's account over the past 6 weeks, viewing documentation, copying test data, downloading architecture diagrams, everything he needed to create a convincing presentation, but nothing that would actually let him operate the system. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother Jason. When's Dad closing the Apple deal? Planning the yacht party for next weekend. Invite list at 200. You coming? I stared at the message. Jason was 26, worked sporadically in cryptocurrency consulting, and lived in Dad's guest house rent-free. Apparently, he was already spending money from a deal that hadn't happened yet. On screen, Dad was pulling up what he'd called yesterday's test results, screenshots of my system running various optimizations, all pulled from my own testing logs. As you can see, he said, trying to regain control of the room, the performance metrics are exceptional. We need to see it run, another executive interrupted. Not screenshots, actual execution. The system is operational, Dad insisted. This authentication issue is just. My phone rang. A known number. I answered. Is this Dr. Mera Morrison? A woman's voice asked, professional, slightly urgent. This is Catherine Wells, senior counsel at Apple. I'm calling from the meeting where your father is presenting. We're experiencing technical difficulties with the demonstration. You provided your number as the lead developer. Can you help us verify the system's functionality? I looked at my laptop screen, where Dad was visibly sweating, trying to explain to 12 Apple executives why the revolutionary algorithm he was selling for $2.4 billion wouldn't actually run. I can help, I said. But there's something you should know first. Go ahead. My father doesn't own commercial rights to that algorithm. I do. He's attempting to sell you something he has no legal authority to transfer. Silence on the other end. Then, can you hold for one moment? Through my hacked video feed, I watched Catherine Wells whisper something to Sarah Tmain. Sarah's expression went from impatient to coldly furious in about 2 seconds. Catherine came back on the line. Dr. Morrison, are you able to join this meeting? We need to clarify the IP situation immediately. I can join remotely, I said. 30 seconds later, I was on the official Zoom call, camera on, sitting in my Seattle apartment in a Stanford hoodie and zero makeup, facing 12 Apple executives and my father, whose face had gone the color of chalk. Dr. Morrison, Sarah Tmain said carefully, your father has represented that he owns commercial rights to the optimization algorithm we've been discussing. Can you clarify your relationship to this technology? I developed it over 4 years as part of my doctoral research at Stanford, I said. I'm the sole author of every line of code. The algorithm is currently licensed non-exclusively to 3 companies, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, and Oracle, who provided funding for my research. Those licenses explicitly prevent me from selling exclusive rights to anyone else. The room went very quiet. My father, I continued, has no technical involvement in the development, no legal ownership of the code, and no authority to negotiate licensing deals on my behalf. Dad found his voice. Mera, sweetheart, this is a misunderstanding. We discussed commercializing your work. You agreed. We had one conversation last March, I interrupted. You asked what I was working on. I explained my research. You asked if it had commercial applications. I said yes, and that I already had licensing agreements with 3 major companies. At no point did I authorize you to sell it, especially not exclusive rights that would violate my existing contracts. Sarah Tmain turned to Dad. Mr. Morrison, did you disclose to us that this technology already has non-exclusive licenses with Microsoft, AWS, and Oracle? Those are just research partnerships, Dad stammered. Not commercial licenses. They're commercial licenses, I said. I shared my screen showing the contracts. Microsoft pays me $400,000 annually, AWS pays $350,000, Oracle pays $275,000. All 3 agreements explicitly state that I cannot grant exclusive rights to any other party without their written consent, which I haven't obtained and don't plan to obtain. Additionally, the algorithm's development was partially funded by an NSF grant. Federal grant terms require that any commercialization be done through approved channels, and that IP developed under grant funding cannot be sold exclusively without NSF review. Your proposed deal would violate federal grant regulations. Catherine Wells was typing rapidly on her laptop. Mr. Morrison, Did you conduct any IP due diligence before arranging this meeting? Dad's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Let me understand this correctly, Sarah said, her voice dangerously calm. You attempted to sell Apple exclusive rights to technology that, 1, you don't own, 2, is already licensed to 3 of our competitors, and 3, is subject to federal grant restrictions. Is that accurate? There's been a miscommunication, Dad said desperately. Mera doesn't understand the business implications. I understand them perfectly. I've been successfully licensing this technology for 2 years, I said. My current annual licensing revenue is over $1 million. I have zero interest in selling exclusive rights, even if it were legally possible, which it isn't. An executive I hadn't heard speak yet unmuted, a younger man, maybe 40, VP of Cloud Infrastructure. Dr. Morrison, you mentioned the algorithm is currently operational. Can you demonstrate that? Absolutely, I said. I opened my control panel, entered my master developer key, a 256-character authorization code that only I possessed, and executed a processing simulation. The system came alive on my screen, real-time optimization of a test server network, showing the 47% response time improvement Dad had promised, along with the energy consumption reduction. The demonstration ran for 90 seconds while 12 Apple executives watched in silence. As you can see, I said when it completed, the system works exactly as described. The issue isn't the technology. The issue is that my father was attempting to demonstrate a system he has no authorization to operate. Sarah Tmain closed her portfolio. Mr. Morrison, this meeting is concluded. Our legal team will be reviewing your representations for potential fraud. Do not contact Apple again. Wait, Dad started. Catherine Wells said to her counsel, please escort Mr. Morrison from the building. Security should be contacted. The video feed showed 2 security personnel entering the conference room. Dad was saying something, protesting, but his microphone had been muted. Within 2 minutes, he was being walked out. Dr. Morrison, Sarah said, turning her attention back to me, given the circumstances, would you be interested in discussing actual licensing terms with Apple? Non-exclusive, respecting your existing agreements. I would, I said. Catherine will send you contact information for our licensing team. Thank you for your clarity today. The call ended. I sat in my apartment, staring at the blank screen, processing what had just happened. My phone exploded with messages. Jason, what the thund did you just do? Dad, you sabotaged the Apple deal. Unknown number, this is your father. Call me immediately. You've destroyed something incredible out of spite. Mom, divorced from Dad for 8 years. Your brother called me. What's happening? I ignored all of them and opened my system logs. Over the past 6 weeks, Dad had accessed my documentation 147 times. He'd copied every test result, every performance metric, every architecture diagram. He'd downloaded my published papers. He'd even accessed my NSF grant proposal, public information, and stripped out the sections about licensing restrictions. He'd built an entire presentation around my work while carefully omitting every detail that would reveal he had no authority to sell it. The Apple legal team contacted me 3 days later, not to discuss licensing, which was handled separately with their technical team, but to inform me that they were investigating Dad for fraud, misrepresentation, and attempted theft of intellectual property. Apparently, I wasn't the first person he'd approached. Over the previous 8 months, Dad had attempted to sell exclusive rights to my algorithm to Google, Meta, and IBM. None of those deals had progressed to the contract stage, but all 3 companies confirmed receiving similar pitches. Revolutionary technology developed by his brilliant daughter, available for immediate acquisition. The FBI's Economic Crimes Division opened an investigation in week 4. Wire fraud, they said. Because Dad had used electronic communications to attempt the Apple sale, and the dollar amount exceeded $1 million, it qualified for federal prosecution. I never intended for it to go criminal, I just wanted him to stop claiming ownership of my work. But federal prosecutors don't particularly care about family dynamics when multi-billion-dollar fraud is involved. Dad hired a lawyer who argued this was a good faith misunderstanding between father and daughter, that I'd given him implied permission to explore commercialization, that families had different rules about intellectual property. None of it worked. The documentation was too clear: my name on every patent application, my name on every license agreement, my credentials on every system access log. Dad's name appeared nowhere, except as my emergency contact on university forms from 6 years ago. The case never went to trial. Dad accepted a plea agreement, 2 years probation, $150,000 restitution to cover my legal fees and investigative costs for companies he'd defrauded, and a prohibition on making any commercial claims regarding my work. Jason sent one final message after the plea hearing: "Hope you're proud of yourself. You destroyed Dad over a computer program." I blocked his number. Mom called once. "Your father made mistakes, but he's still your father. This prosecution is vindictive." "He tried to steal 4 years of my work," I said. "He was trying to help himself to $2.4 billion using my work as the product. I've been monetizing it successfully for 2 years." She didn't call again. Apple eventually licensed my algorithm non-exclusively, respecting my existing agreements, for $800,000 annually with performance bonuses. The contract was negotiated professionally, reviewed by lawyers, and executed without family drama. My current annual licensing revenue is $2.3 million. I'm expanding the algorithm's capabilities, working on version 3.0, and have interest from 6 more companies. I haven't spoken to Dad or Jason in 18 months. Dad sends occasional emails, mostly legal threats that go nowhere, sometimes guilt trips about family loyalty. I archive them unread. Last month, I received a letter from Jason. He'd apparently separated from Dad, was working a real job for the first time in 5 years, and wanted to apologize for getting caught up in Dad's schemes. The letter was 3 pages long, detailed, hitting every note of accountability. I read it once, then filed it away unanswered. Some relationships end not because of one dramatic moment, but because of what that moment reveals about the entire foundation. Dad didn't suddenly become someone who'd steal my work. He'd always been that person. I just finally built something valuable enough to expose it. My algorithm runs on servers across 4 continents now. Every optimization it performs, every efficiency it creates, every cost saving it generates, that's my work. My 4 years of development that my father tried to sell to Apple for $2.4 billion while calling it my basic starter code. The servers demanded my access key because I'm the only person who has it. I'm the only person who built it.